Hello and welcome to the Sound Up Seattle podcast, your one-stop shop for all things Seattle and Washington sports. I'm your host, Tyler Cartwright, joined as always by my co-host,
John Carey.
And today we've got some exciting news. Alex Bregman going to the Boston Red Sox for 3 years. It's not a Mariners signing, but it is a signing that will definitely impact them for the future. So we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about the Seahawks getting Klint Kubiak as their new offensive coordinator. A couple of things that have been said by management groups and ownerships in a couple of for the Seahawks and Mariners, and then a little Storms discussion before we get into how our Super Bowl bets went from last week. Anything to say, John, before we get started?
No, let's dive in.
All right, let's do it. Here is some Coyote Picnic. All right, the first thing that I want to talk about is obviously the Alex Bregman signing, because I'm a Mariners junkie and I can't get enough discussion, enough Mariners podcasts. Anything to say about them is just all I want to talk about. So Alex Bregman signs a $120 million deal over 3 years with the Boston Red Sox with 2 opt-outs. So technically he could opt out at the end of this year or next year if he wanted to. But $40 million for that man is quite a bit. I'm sure he will be very happy to be making that. We will see if he opts out. Immediate first thoughts, John.
Pleased, double pleased. Pleased to see him leave the Astros, leave the AL West. All that does is make it a weaker division, more easy for the taking. And then also pleased to be seeing him get overpaid on a Boston Red Sox team where he'll hamper their ability to build a contender for years to come. So, yeah, a win-win. Bregman's a good player. Obviously, I'm not a fan of him, but, yeah, great to see him gone. You know, I hated to see him stay, but I love seeing him leave.
He's a guy that, as a player, profiles better in parks like Houston's Park and the Red Sox Fenway Park. I couldn't think of the name of it. He profiles better there because of his right-handed pull power. He obviously played really well with those Crawford boxes in Houston. And wouldn't have necessarily been the best acquisition when it comes to T-Mobile Park power hitting. I think he would have been more like a doubles hitter, somebody who would have struggled to really hit the ball out. So as a Mariners signing, we didn't really love him as a fit. And yeah, so we're really happy to see that he did not go back to the Astros. It does make it interesting for the Red Sox. You know, they've got to move Rafael Devers out of third base, either put him at first base or DH, whatever they want to do. They've kind of got a gluttony of acquisitions there with Tristan Casas and Devers and Bregman now. And it does mean likely that the Astros will have their current outfield as constructed unless they can sign a second baseman and move Jose Altuve out there. The Astros their outfield makes them look that much less formidable, I think. When you look at them, they've got Ben Gamel, Taylor Trammell, a couple old ex-Mariners, and Mauricio Dubon, I think. Guys. Yeah, we don't really miss them. So it just makes the Astros look much less formidable. Obviously, everybody's in on the Texas Rangers right now, so just kind of an interesting balance of power coming after this last season in the AL West. And I think we want to touch on that a little bit more. How does this move impact the Mariners going forward? You know, obviously we don't face Alex Bregman, but really let's talk about what hampers the Houston Astros. So what do you see coming from that?
Yeah, I mean, the same things that have been hampering them for the last couple of years. I think a great comparison between sports between the Houston Astros is with the San Francisco 49ers, a team that has been a perennial contender for the last 6 or 7 years and has built that around just some premier offensive talent. But now they find themselves getting older and they find themselves getting expensive and they're not able to re-sign all these guys. You know, letting Bregman go, an interesting choice by them, but you know, they're getting very, very expensive. So in a way it makes sense. And I think a lot like the Niners, they are struggling to walk the line of retention and age and just everything that comes with being a contender for, 6 years. Credit to their organization. Obviously, they've done a great job keeping this window open, but Yeah, I think I'm starting to see the window close. I just think it's a lot of age down their lineup, and I think their pitching staff is, it's got some upside, but it's also, as we saw last year, very shallow. 1 or 2 injuries, and this entire thing falls apart.
Yeah, 100%. I think you really hit the nail on the head when comparing them to the Niners. It's like they're a team that, and baseball is as a system, because there's no salary cap, you can have teams like the Dodgers and Yankees who can spend their way into contention every year that are perennial contenders. And then you have teams that are kind of in the middle, like the Astros try to have been for the last, half decade to 3/4 of a decade. And you can get teams like the Red Sox who are really competitive, the Phillies who are really competitive in like late 2000s, early 2010s. These windows can close for these teams. And I feel like, it didn't feel like it as a Mariners fan, but this is kind of the back end of the Astros' success. And we're seeing it, Kyle Tucker getting traded. They're going to have to figure out how to rebuild. And obviously Jordan Alvarez is going to be there for a while, but it's like Jose Altuve, he's going to fall off eventually, guys. He's not going to hit 300 for the rest of his life. It's like, this guy's going to be gone.
Yeah.
They signed Christian Walker for 3 years. Isaac Paredes will be there for a couple years, but all in all, this Astros team is going to diminish. We're kind of seeing it crumble from the outside in, and it's just, it's great as a Mariners fan to see. So I'm very happy about that. And the Mariners, there's a reason, I guess, that we can get into this a little bit. There's a reason that people are so upset about the Mariners not spending money, and this is it. It's the window, right? You have a 6-year window if you really do it right. The Astros did it really well. Like, they did such a great job at drafting, acquiring players, making trades, doing all these good things.
Spending money.
Yes. And the Mariners have drafted perfectly. They've developed a great pitching rotation. They've got a lot of good pieces, and they just haven't spent money. And this is their window where they needed to spend money because, sustained success is tough when you're going to have to pay George Kirby. You're going to have to pay Logan Gilbert. Like, that money that they're saying, we can't spend, that's $15 million. Imagine when Logan Gilbert has to start making $30 million. When George Kirby's up to 20, 25, it's like these guys are going to get expensive quickly. And if they didn't jump on this window, it just makes it that much worse for the foreseeable future with this ownership group not being willing to spend in the current state of the Mariners system.
Yeah, it's going to be, what it does is it makes it all the more important to have a really good year this year and to outperform. And we've said it the last couple of years, this pitching staff is so incredible. It's like, just get us a little help, We can't forget that we got a Rosarena last year. And I just think, not only do I think we should be better than we already were last year in terms of record, just based on the talent on the team, and our relief staff being healthy and things like that, but I also, can we just get a little bit lucky this year? Can we just be 5 or 6 games better than maybe we should be, as opposed to 5 or 6 games worse? And if we're 5 or 6 games better than we should be, we will win the division. I don't think there's any doubt. If we're 5 or 6 games better than we should be this year, we will win the division. And if we can make a exciting postseason run, it's just important for the team to show ownership something such that, and maybe ownership is so cheap that they'll just start letting these guys walk regardless. But we can't make it easy for them by just being, because, if all we're doing is winning 54% of our games, it's going to make it a lot easier to let George Kirby walk and say, hey, 54% next year. But if we win, 65% of our games and we're really good this year, it's just going to make it harder for ownership to walk away from some of these guys. So I'm really hoping for an overperformance. I think the Astros getting noticeably worse does help in that regard. How is this for a take? The AL West is the easiest division in the American League. Between the A's are going to be garbage, the Angels are going to be garbage, and if the Astros are closer to a 500 baseball team than some people expect, there is just a lot of open runway in the American League West.
I will agree with you. There's a lot of open runway. You forget that the AL Central has the Minnesota Twins, the Cleveland Guardians, the Royals, and the Tigers all vying for a first place spot at 84 wins. So,
Guardians are always solid. They have a lot of 500 teams. Is the thing. Detroit is their only team that's going to finish 30 games under 500.
Oh, it's going to be Chicago. Detroit's actually gotten better over the last year or a couple of years.
That's fair. That's
yeah.
right.
The White Sox have become the dregs of that division.
Yes,
but yes,
they've taken that spot. Where I think the Angels and the Athletics could both easily vie for that 30 games under 500 spot. So it's not. You're right that it's not as top heavy, but I think there's more of a floor in the American League West.
Yeah. I think when it comes down to it, you look at the top of the American League West, and a lot, it's the Rangers, the Astros, and the Mariners are all projected for approximately 85 to 87 wins. Basically, that's their range. And like you said, if the Mariners can get to 90, they're basically, they're 3 wins above wherever the top of what that is for this division right now. If they can get to 90, that basically assures them a playoff spot and a playoff division win. That would be huge for this team. So that's what we're looking for right now. If we can get 3-4 extra wins, that's all we'll need, and that'll really solidify us based on how we performed last year. Like we said, we had that basically month-long skid where the pitching wasn't great and the hitting wasn't great, I think in May last year, and we really plummeted back into, we were ahead in the AL West, and we really plummeted back into kind of middle of the pack, and we just can't have that. And if we avoid that, I think we'll be in a really good position. And so with this, I want to touch on something that Justin Hollander said, our GM, a couple weeks ago, or maybe a week ago. He just was talking about that second base position after we had signed Jorge Polanco. He said, hey, we're going to rely on Dylan Moore. We're going to rely on Ryan Bliss and Leo Rivas, these guys who are kind of our backups. And maybe Cole Young will get some run. Maybe that kind of stuff will happen. How do we feel about that? Dylan Moore, I posted in our document because it's important to look at Dylan Moore, because it was in the article. Dylan Moore's splits are kind of crazy, home and away. If you really look at it, over the last 3 years, Dylan Moore's basically an 800 to 850 OPS hitter away from T-Mobile Park and a 600 to 675 hitter at T-Mobile. It's kind of crazy how insane he is away from T-Mobile.
Well, who do we have to pay to get T-Mobile renovated to make it more of a hitter-friendly park? It drives me insane. It drives me completely up the wall. I know it helps our pitching staff, but it's just crazy how much better our offensive players perform away from T-Mobile. Yeah. Well, in answer to your question, I don't feel fantastic about it. This is a big part of why we were hoping that there was one more name to add to this roster, so there would be less reliance on this group and on guys like Dylan Moore specifically. But yeah, he's a guy I like a lot in spot positions, and a guy I don't like very much at all, in consistent positions. And it sounds like he's going to be in a very consistent position, and I hope he surprises me, but from what we've seen, he gets more predictable as seasons go on. Pitchers get more used to what they need to show him as seasons go on, and his performance drops. So I don't feel great. How do you feel?
Yeah, we talked about him a lot last year. Him and Luke Raley, who, again, we don't feel super comfortable about, but they're guys that we said can get overexposed. And it's when you're out there more than you were intended to be generally by your player profile. Dylan Moore is not a guy that you want to have hitting every game against right-handed pitchers. He's a guy who crushes lefties, obviously hits better away from T-Mobile Park, and it's just that profile does not bode well for a 162-game season. What I do think that this could mean is, especially with Ryan Bliss being a right-handed hitter, Leo Rivas, I believe, is a switch hitter, but I don't think he showed anything important. But I think Leo Rivas will actually get some more play than he did last year, which is not great. Or maybe not more play than last year because JP was injured. He had to come in and be shortstop for an extended period of time. But what it does mean, in my mind, is that Cole Young, as a left-handed hitter, is going to be able to come in a little bit more than we expect this season. I think he's sitting Double-A right now, but they probably expect more out of him. We're really going to be looking for him when spring training rolls around and camp comes through, which I believe started today for the pitchers and catchers. But in spring training, I'm really going to be looking to see how he performs, if I think he'll break camp with the team or if he'll stay down. I would expect him to come up sometime in May. I think Dylan Moore is going to get a lot of run early. Maybe Cole Young gets a cup of coffee and sent back down for a little bit, but there's definitely an opportunity for a left-handed second baseman to come in and try and perform for this team.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, that'll be interesting. Obviously, looking for some help from the farm system is always good and has proved fruitful in the past for this Mariners organization, but
depth-wise, it is not great. If JP goes down, we look so much worse.
Correct. The shallowness of the roster and just having to rely on potential farm system guys, it's just not a good position to put them in to succeed. Baseball, more than any other sport, there's a reason you see like the, double A, triple A system of just like working guys up is comfort is so important, especially early. You see great prospects ruined by being forced into situations too big for them to handle. And obviously, no Mariners prospect is going to be forced into the number 1, 2, or 3 role. But I just wish there wasn't any pressure on our farm system to, get in there and play for us. And I think there will be. I think the shallowness of our roster and the talent of the, underside of it is going to force some younger guys up maybe earlier than we like. And it's just a situation where I don't have a ton of confidence in them performing. And I think it could hurt the long-term development to be forced into something early. So would have loved one more name, Tyler. Would have loved one more name.
Wouldn't we all? I'm trying to be a little bit optimistic here to say, Cole Young has a chance, but I did want to point out the Dylan Moore, Cole Young scenario that we're in because the future does look a little bleak if anybody goes down with an injury. Like Dom Canzone is basically our 4th outfielder. Yeah. You remember that guy? That guy was down in AAA by the midpoint of last year. Mm-hmm. It's like this team, there's an opportunity for them to really, really hit a wall if anybody gets injured.
Correct. And we can hope for Cole, but it is what it is.
There's room to make a trade early in the season too. It's not like they're confined right now, but in terms of free agent acquisitions, there's not more to look for. Now we're just kind of waiting to see what moves that Jerry can come up with, which does kind of suck.
Yeah, agreed. But the good news is no Mariners ever get hurt, so we don't have anything to worry about there. We'll just be healthy this whole year.
Especially not their position players.
Correct. Yeah. Famously tough position players. JP. I'm going to be praying for his knees every single night.
JP, Julio, Jorge, they all were injured last year. All extended time on the IL. Just
so tough. Time. Yep.
We'll see. We haven't actually talked about Mitch Haniger or Mitch Garver much, but they might actually have larger roles in this team than when we were anticipating too.
God. Oh no. Maybe Garver will bring it all back. Maybe this will be the year that Garver hits 300 like he promised. And,
he's an every other year guy.
I'll be incredibly happy. Yeah, that'd be amazing. I'd be so psyched. But
it's he can't be as bad as he was last year. He can only be better.
Statistically speaking, it'd be hard pressed to be worse than last year.
All right, let's get off the Mariners. Let's stop bemoaning them, and let's talk a little bit of Seahawks. The Seahawks. I don't remember when it exactly happened, but obviously they fired Ryan Grubb and then took their sweet time finding their next offensive coordinator, and they found Klint Kubiak from the New Orleans Saints. Talk to me about this signing. With your initial thoughts, how have they formed over time? What have you been thinking about it?
Yeah, I'm pleased with the hiring. Klint Kubiak, career professional, the son of Gary Kubiak. If anybody's confused, we're not getting in the geriatric Gary. We're getting in the young and energetic Klint. He's coming from New Orleans. He was the offensive coordinator for the New Orleans Saints. My thoughts on him is he's worked with all the right people. There's been a lot of talk about the Seattle offensive coordinator job since the Grubb firing, everyone was kind of thinking McDonald is looking for somebody that kind of lines up with his offensive philosophies. And I think instead of necessarily finding that Ravens-esque run-first offensive guy, he went and found somebody that's worked with all the right people and who is moldable. Klint has been the offensive coordinator at times for the Vikings, 49ers, and Saints. So getting some time under Shanahan, I think, is very valuable in terms of just any offensive coordinator. Every offensive coordinator should have to spend a summer interning under Shanahan just to understand the modern NFL. But the way he's coordinated for his last 2 stints don't strike me as what we would have expected in terms of run first. But he's done a good job in both his jobs, and he's young and talented. And I think that McDonald is counting on being able to kind of mold him into his offensive coordinator.
Yeah, I would agree with that. He's a young guy, only 37. kind of like Mike Macdonald, just kind of hitting their stride right now in terms of their coaching tenure. Obviously, spent his first few years in college, as most coaches do, and then Vikings, Broncos, and then back to the Vikings. Kind of bounced around a little bit, but has been a part of some good offenses here when it comes to looking at, the Vikings a few years ago were pretty dang good offensively. That was with Kirk Cousins, I believe, while he was there. And his ability to work with Kirk Cousins and get the most out of him, I think, is actually a good sign when it comes to working with Geno Smith. Like, those guys are pretty comparable in terms of their play styles and everything like that.
And even coming from the Saints, Derek Carr. Like, Geno Smith is a rich man's Derek Carr, I think a lot of people would say. And, people forget because the season completely fell apart. But when the Saints were 2-0 and had won their first 2 games by a combined 62 points, people thought the Saints were going to be really good this year. Their offense, they put up 91 points in their first 2 games this season. People thought their offense was legit, and then, injuries really hampered them. But he showed coming out of the gates that he can coach an offense that is balanced and efficient and moves the ball down the field. I really understand why he would want to come coach Geno, JSN, DK. But he does seem like another pass-first guy, which I do think is kind of interesting just because Mike's vision seemed to be moving away from that. Yeah,
I think it's a question of, when he was on the Vikings, I think it was Dalvin Cook, if I'm not mistaken. Like, that was who their running back was while he was there.
And Kamara. Oh, sorry, no. Sorry, the Vikings, yes.
Vikings, yeah. Right. And he was also the quarterback's coach there, and he got moved to offensive coordinator. So he's definitely a guy that works more towards the quarterback side of things. But I think long term he is more moldable when it comes to, working with Mike Macdonald. He understands that, like, this team is going to have to be able to run the ball. They had Alvin Kamara, they had Dalvin Cook on those teams. Kenneth Walker, I think that they expected him, and maybe they might still expect him to be at least a fraction of what those guys are. I don't think he'll be an Alvin Kamara type for the rest of his career, but he might have that ability. He's got the pass catching capability. Same with Charbonnet. Like, they've got the ability to work around the field with their running backs, I think, in a similar way to Kamara. And offensively, I think it can be constructed well. The Dalvin Cook seasons, that was just, Dalvin Cook would run all over teams, and he was really nice. So I think he's got experience in kind of both veins of offense, which I think is nice to make in terms of making him moldable, in terms of Mike Macdonald saying, hey, we want to do this with the team this year because Geno is aging. We want to do something different, or we want to say, hey, this game we need to have Geno throwing the ball more because, their cornerbacks suck. Their defensive backs suck. Okay, whatever it is, he's got the pedigree to be able to bring a team to that point to be able to compete.
Sure. Yeah, I think that's well said. Overall, I'm happy. I think part of my concern with whoever they were going to hire after the Grubb firing was to get somebody too in the trenches. And say what you will, the way this roster is constructed, you have Geno Smith, you have JSN, you have DK Metcalf. If you're not throwing the ball first, you are misusing your assets. And, running the ball more than 10 times in a game is probably a good idea, but if I was worried that they would develop too much of a run-first mentality and kind of waste the glut of weapons they have in terms of the passing game, that's one thing that no longer concerns me, because what Klint showed in New Orleans in particular is a willingness to balance the run and the pass, but an emphasis on down-the-field passing. Even more than volume, he really utilized the explosive play down the field. And with the weapons they have, I think that's going to remain very important. So in that regard, I'm pleased. Part of me is just like, okay, if you were going to go hire Klint Kubiak, why not just hold on to Ryan Grubb for one more season? But maybe there was also some behind-the-scenes stuff we didn't know. Maybe him and McDonald just didn't get along. Regardless, I'm pleased. I'm a little surprised, but I'm glad Klint's in. I think he's going to be a good addition.
Yeah, I'm the same way. And this does bring up a question of how do we think this signing or acquisition, whatever you want to call this, but bringing in Klint Kubiak, how does this affect DK's long-term staying potential with the Seahawks? Because, I think that Mike Macdonald would not necessarily say that his desire is to take a lot of deep shots. And I think contract-wise, the Seahawks are not in the best spot to, extend DK, and if they want to extend Geno, whatever it is, like DK and Geno kind of go hand in hand with the way that those two interact. Geno's got a great deep ball. DK's kind of only thing is getting open down the field. And this team's just got a lot of questions when it comes to contracts-wise. Like Geno is they've made it very clear he's going to be their quarterback for this year, and they may or may not work on extensions for after this. But it makes me question what they plan to do with DK, and then in subsequent, following that thought, what their plan is with Geno. Are they going to extend him? Do we really think that is what they're looking to do with a 35-year-old quarterback?
Yeah, I think this season is going to go a long way in determining what happens with Geno and his future in Seattle. I think if they're contending, I think a playoff run would be necessary to keep him around, at least long term. But it's one of those things where if they make the playoffs, one thing I'll say about McDonald coming from the Ravens, he doesn't believe, I can't imagine, in tanking and falling apart and getting really bad. And so, if they make the playoffs, I could see him giving Geno an extension and just trying to, see how long they can keep this window open. But yeah, if it doesn't work out, I think Geno's future will really be dictated on the field. DK is a much more interesting question. I think it's a really good question. For a couple of reasons. The main reason, which you hit the nail on the head of, is Mike McDonald's vision and paying DK Metcalf $20 million a year, I think, do not go hand in hand. And I also just think that there's going to be a real issue, all love to DK. He's been awesome. It's been great having him in Seattle. But when it's time for him to get paid, I think he's going to want to get paid like a number one receiver. And the fact of the matter is, I just don't think he's quite on that level. I think he is probably the 14th, 15th, 16th best wide receiver in the NFL. Maybe that's even...
Would you have him above JSN right now?
See, I'm not even sure I would have him above JSN.
Yeah, I don't think so.
Maybe he's more like 25th. And I also just think JSN profiles as a guy that, say what you will about DK, if DK runs the right route, nobody can guard him, which is spectacular. But he can't do that on third down, on demand, when it matters. It's what separates, what makes the top tier guys like Justin Jefferson and Jamar Chase so special is their ability to be DK Metcalf on a great route every time you need them to. And he's just not that guy. He is available when he's available. And I just think long term, I really believe in JSN, to your point. I do believe in his ability to be a star number one wide receiver. And if that's our guy, what can we afford to give DK to keep him in? And honestly, the dirty little truth that not a lot of people are talking about yet is I think the answer is they just don't. I think DK's future is not in Seattle. I'm 85% sure he will not be on the team in 3 years.
I would probably agree with you. Especially, I hate to say it, but what DK brings to the team in terms of the offense can be great. It has the potential to be great every once in a while. But he also, his kind of attitude, he costs the team a lot of penalties. All that kind of stuff happens during a season. It's like the net negatives and positives. At some point, their counteraction is it brings his value down. And whether you want to admit that or not, if you're DK or DK's camp, it's like DK's value is in his ability to break routes open. And some of that comes with having a good offensive line to keep the quarterback safe for more than 1.5 seconds. And some of that just comes from DK getting open and running by guys and having the right quarterback. And I think Geno long-term, I agree with you. I don't think he'll be here for another 3 years. It's like, if Geno is not here, I don't think DK's here. And that's kind of where I settled at thinking about this topic. So it was just something that I wanted to talk through.
And I could really see Geno staying and them still saying, DK, we're not giving you the number you're looking for, because he's going to be looking for a big number. And I would not be surprised if there isn't a underperforming team that's willing to give it to him. But I just he's A.J. Brown if A.J. Brown only ran vertical routes. It's just, he has value. And I think this is the real kicker is, he also gives you the contested catch thing, which a lot of small, speedy route runners can't give you. But there are always speed guys. Tavon Austin types, there are always guys where it's like, hey, we need you to return punts and run really fast in a straight line. There are always those guys, and you don't have to pay them a lot because it's actually surprisingly easy to be really fast in a straight line. What's hard is being like a really good route runner, and that's not DK's strength. So when it's time to say like, okay, is it worth paying DK $17 million a year? You have to compare that to the value of paying $3 million a year to everybody's favorite college player who didn't get drafted and is now a UDFA, and you can secure him to run vertical routes. So I just think it's kind of a tough spot for DK. I would have hoped that by now he would have developed more of a route tree, and unfortunately I'm not very confident to say that he has.
Yeah, I would agree. This does open a question also for Tyler Lockett as well. His contract is a pretty big hit on the team. We don't need to talk about that though. I think he'll be somebody that we either cut or trade. I don't really know what the entire plan will be, but Tyler Lockett will probably not be on the team this year as well.
Yeah, I agreed. He's just that's easier. That's age is catching up with him.
Yeah.
If anything,
we love Tyler Lockett as a guy. Yeah. We love him, but
and I could see him staying on a team friendly deal to kind of be a coach on the sidelines, but yeah, his days of elite play are, if not over, then certainly at the end.
Yep. All right. Anything else to say with regards to the Seahawks, or do you want to move on to the Storm?
No, I think that's it. Excited to have Kubiak in. It's another big name. We love our coaches' sons here, apparently, in Seattle.
That's just all football now. It's just all sons.
Honestly, the older I get, the more I realize it all is just coaches' sons, just all the way down. It's a real kind of Nepo baby thing where it's like Klint Kubiak's first job, he probably didn't deserve to get. No offense to Klint, but just because he was his dad's son. But now he's got, 15 years experience coaching in the NFL. And that all comes because of the fact that he was his dad's son at one point. So it's just, it is kind of funny. This isn't the podcast to figure out nepotism, but it is kind of just funny how that works out.
Yep. It's an interesting one. All right. Let's jump to the Storm here. So the Storm, since we last talked, I don't think we talked too much about them. Or maybe, that was 2 weeks ago. We talked through the number 2 pick trade and everything like that.
Correct.
So since then, the Storm have re-signed Onyeka Ogwumike. They have Gabby Williams returning on a 1-year deal, and Jordan Horstan, our secondary guard, has torn her ACL and will be out for the season. So quite a few things have happened with regards to the Storm. How do we think this shapes both their pick at the number 2 slot, and how do you like the moves that they have done? They basically brought back last year's team, sans Jewel Lloyd. So how do you feel about it?
I feel good about it. I should say, first and foremost, I was not sure Onyeka would be re-signing, and it's great to have her back in Seattle. I think she's amazing. It's great to have her experience and talent. She had a good year for us last year, and it's not ceremonial bringing her back. She's going to be probably the star, the centerpiece of this Storm team. So. In that regard, it's fantastic to have her back. Gabby, having her back is good as well. Horstan is a big loss. I really liked Jordan. Her ability to play the 2 next to a star guard is fantastic. She fits really well next to a really talented guard. Her loss is kind of, it's almost a win-win just in terms of, I think this allows a lot of flexibility to try out guards for this Storm team who can, run with Onyeka and some of these other, big players in the WNBA and who could potentially develop into, secondary stars. And so, because Jordan's just a classic, wing guard in terms of second best guard. So I wasn't expecting her offensive repertoire to really blossom this year with the absence of Jewel Lloyd, but to have her sit out so we can kind of try other people, and then for her to return next year when we use the number 2 pick to hopefully draft a star guard, it's going to be really nice again to have Jordan back in the lineup. So, obviously I'm not glad that she's gone, but it does present an opportunity in the short term.
Yeah. My one concern is long term for this team, this is kind of the year that they were hoping to compete before a rebuild. After this season, Nyeka's gone, Gabby Williams will be gone, Skylar Diggins-Smith will be gone. They'll lose all of their veteran players. And I think they were really hoping that Horstan would be a major part of this team. She was basically a starter towards the back half of last year, and so she had become a really important piece with Jewel Lloyd, with Skylar Diggins-Smith, and then this really competitive front court with Gabby Williams and Nyeka. So it's a tough loss, definitely, with Horstan, and it is tough that we basically don't have a secondary guard. Nika Mule, I don't know if you guys remember her. We were excited about drafting her out of UConn, but it was she basically didn't play at all last year, and I don't know that she'll do anything especially important this year. She's kind of a small guard when it comes to the WNBA, and I think that means that they're going to try and get this number 2 pick as somebody, and maybe they were going to go with Kiki either way, and they'll still draft her, but I think long term, it might hamper them in terms of what they can draft based on their competitive window. If they want to compete this year, if they've decided that is what they're going to do based on these signings and based on how their team is constructed, they kind of have to have a secondary guard and somebody that can handle the ball when Skylar Diggins-Smith is not the primary point guard. And so you need to have somebody, if they're going to commit to this season, you need to draft somebody that has ball handling skills and basically can play an off-role point guard, like a backup point guard.
Yeah, I'm not worried about that. You don't use the number 2 pick on a secondary player to help keep a window open for older players. That would be the biggest mistake the Storm could make. We need to remember that the New York Liberty still exist, and they are still basically intact. I don't care who you put next to Skylar Diggins and Nyeka Ogumwike. I can't imagine we're going to win a series against the New York Liberty. So let's not spend the number 2 pick trying to get us over a theoretical hill that I think is insurmountable. This year will be fun. I think this team will be competitive. I'm excited to see them compete. But let's not reinvent the wheel here. Let's use the number 2 pick to draft the biggest potential star that we possibly can. And I do think, the Jordan thing, Jordan was awesome last year. She was in and out of the starting lineup. She is a defensive specialist whose 3-point shot kind of comes and goes on her and whose offensive game is very limited. With the loss of Jewel Lloyd and her, possession by possession offensive punch, I think we will need more offense at guard than Horstan could probably provide. So it is to my point of if we get a Paige Bucher type, Jordan makes a lot more sense next to her than she does next to Skylar Diggins-Smith, who's way more of a pass-first point guard anyway.
Yeah.
So you're 100%, you're 100% right. She is very important, and it's going to be a bummer to miss her. But considering that I'm not really looking at championship gold this year in my mind, I'm just here to have a good time. I think I would rather try to work to develop another potential guard, to go and find a diamond in the rough and let them kind of grow this year as we make this transition. But yeah, Horstan will be important when she comes back. She is a big part of the team, and we'll be excited to see her on the court again.
Yeah, I think the Storm are smart enough to know that they're not necessarily competing this year.
Yeah, I certainly hope so.
It does, yeah. It would concern me if they felt like they could really compete with the Liberty, the Aces. That would just be very tough. Either, if we end up with Paige Buchers, if that is our pick, I think they would have done that either way. That wouldn't change that. If we end up with Kiki, I think that they were bound to pick her anyways. There's those top 4 players that we talked about a couple weeks ago, and I think that they will pick one of those 4 players. That's just those 4 players are kind of the top of the class. You got the number 2 pick, take one of them and go with it. I just wanted to point it out because teams may or may not be known to what is it? Not accustomed. What is the word? Satisfy Satisfy like your players' desires.
Oh, accommodate.
Accommodate. Yeah, God, I couldn't think of the word accommodate.
Yeah, but I think they're in the good position. I think they've done a great job taking care of Skylar Diggins and Nyeka, but both of them are on short-term deals. I think it's pretty clear that the franchise is not in their hands.
Yes.
They are stewards that we are very appreciative of, really glad to have in Seattle. But they are, kind of balancing one generation to the next. Last year was the year for them to try to compete at the highest level, and we saw that they just weren't quite there.
Yeah.
And now they're going to be turning their eyes towards the future. It's great to have the two vets in. Obviously, they're both really talented, but we're just, let's not reinvent the wheel.
For sure. All right. Anything else to say about the Storm before we talk about our lovely Super Bowl bets from last week?
No, that's all I have on the Storm. It'll be exciting to see who they pick. I'm still very excited, pretty invested, but we'll have to wait.
All right. Talk to both me and the fans about what our picks were last week. What do we come from, and who won? Because I think, if I remember correctly, I had a really good week, but that's just my own personal bias.
Yeah, you son of a gun. I bet you do think you had a good week. And you did. Sorry, I'm just pulling up the piece of paper where we got all this written. So the first thing we have to do is we have to decide. Obviously, we made our 7 picks on the Super Bowl last week. One of us was guaranteed the win, picking over-unders or yes-nos on various situations. One of them was, will there be a very controversial call? Would you consider either the A.J. Brown penalty or the subsequent non-holding call on Goddard to be controversial? Or were both of them in the moment controversial, but not really?
I think so. Looking at it from the perspective of how we viewed it, you texted me when the A.J. Brown play happened, and you said, "Oh, there we go." And if the game had been close, I think it would have been something that people got upset about. I think in the grand scheme of things, that play didn't matter. Most of the plays didn't matter in terms of whether the refs called holding or whatever it was. But if that play, if the outcome of the game was different, I think it would have been a controversial call. And for that, I don't even want to take this one. I feel like we should just call it a half point for each of us. But we can't end with a tie in case we went 3-3, because I feel like it's both controversial, but also not because of the way that the game happened. So
no, it's okay. You won't hurt my feelings. I do think it technically counts. I think, to your point, it would have mattered a lot more if the game had been competitive, but when it happened, everybody was like, here we go again. And I literally texted you, okay, there's the controversial play. So I'll give it to you. It was not going to affect who won or who lost.
No.
All it was going to affect is if you beat me 4-3, or, as reality turns out, you beat me 5-2.
Let's go.
In our Super Bowl bets. Because you had the over on Jalen Hurts yards, which was a win for you. You had the under on Patrick Mahomes' rushing yards, which was a win for you. I forgot that you had that one. You had the no missed kick. There wasn't a missed kick. You had the controversial call. You had under on Saquon rushing yards.
Which was crazy. I was scared of that one, but it ended up being okay.
And then I had, thankfully, redeeming Philadelphia to win, and I had the under on Travis Kelce reception yards. So those were my 2 measly wins out of the 7, but you beat me 5-2, a clean win. Well done. Craig, congratulations is in order.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. It really brings me back to value dogs and how those don't really matter anymore. It's only about the Super Bowl,
5-2 all time, baby. That's a 2-1.
Those count towards my value dog. That counts towards my value dog record, actually. We ended up about even.
You know what? I don't think 5-2 would have got you even.
I don't think it would have caught me up. I
agree. I'd leave it on its own.
Oh, no, the Saquon thing was super weird. Just the fact that he was just never really able to break anything out. I think we were both expecting a big game from him. And we talked through a bet that I made before the pod. And we were talking about it. We were like, that feels so good. And just none of it hit. Of the 3 things that I had predicted, none of them hit. And we probably needed a close game. But the way that it happened, it just, Vegas won everything, I think. That was what happened.
Yeah. Yeah. The Saquon thing, Vegas did really good on Saquon. He didn't score the touchdown, which both of us thought he'd get one. And then, he had about 60 yards on the grounds that were all very toughly earned. And all we were waiting for is the Saquon 60-yard touchdown that he's been hitting again and again and again. If he hits that, he's at 120 yards with a touchdown, and all the Saquon overs and all the Saquon touchdown bets are hitting. But credit to the Chiefs defense. The only thing they did well all game was defending the run. So they did a good job against him, if nothing else.
Yep. All right. Anything else to say, John? A nice, concise 45-minute podcast, as we're known to do,
I cannot believe we made it to 45 minutes. Unbelievable. I thought it was going to be 20 minutes even today.
Yeah, he was telling me before the podcast, he was like, this is going to be quite the small podcast, right? And I was like, we got 4 teams to talk about. It'll be at least 45 minutes.
we truly have the gift of gab. Unbelievable, but I'm proud of us.
We're highly touted yappers, actually.
A-tier yappers, absolutely.
All right. Well, for John Carey, I'm Tyler Cartwright, and this has been the Sound Up Seattle podcast. If you enjoyed this episode of Sound Up Seattle, please feel free to give us a follow, subscribe on YouTube, click that like button, turn on notifications, all that good stuff. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts as well, just to listen to us instead of seeing our lovely smiling faces and John's glorious beard. You can find Sound Up Seattle on Twitter, TikTok, and Instagram, all at Sound Up Seattle, all lowercase, all one word. You can email us your questions, comments, or concerns at soundupseattle@gmail.com. You can find me, Tyler, at TyCart50, everywhere it's important. And you can find John
drinking leftover Galentine's rosé.
Ooh, that was a little red. Is it some like orange wine or something like that?
No, it's a rosé. I think it just looks darker in this light than it actually is.
It's been aerated for a few days since Galentine's Day.
It's nice. Yeah, the girlfriend had Galentine's and came home with a box of wine. So we're doing it classy this evening.
I got a bouquet. I'm upset. I wanted the wine.
Way better than flowers.
All right. I guess with all that being said, not much going on.
Go M's.
Go M's, baby.
Bregman's gone. The witch is dead.